Hey, hi everyone. This is Shlomo Arel here with Kel Realty, your trusted real estate agent and your senior real estate specialist. And again, I have Matt Margolis with Margolis Weldon, and he is again an elder law attorney, and always come with a lot of information. How you doing, Matt?
Good, Shlomo. How are you?
No complaints in this weather. It feels
For
like
sure.
summer is here. And today we're actually going to talk about trust. So, something very important, lots of information to know. We'll try to go over the important stuff. And obviously, if any one of you have any questions, you can always email me or email Matt. We'll be happy to answer all these questions. I don't think there is a point where we can actually start or a preview for a trust. So I'll hand it to you, Matt, and tell us what a trust is. Why do we need it?
Sure. So, when we talk about trusts, I want to be clear that for the most part, not for the most part, but for the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to be talking about a revocable living trust, okay? Because there's different types of trusts out there. There are irrevocable trusts, there are asset protection trusts, there are special needs trusts,
Right.
there are irrevocable life insurance trusts for people with very large estates. So we're going to be talking about a revocable living trust. This is the most common type of trust out there. So, Shlomo, anybody that you might know or any planning maybe you've done, if anybody's kind of mentioned, oh, my spouse and I put together a trust, or we just had a trust put together by an attorney, pretty likely it's a revocable living trust. Okay. Um, for the most part, people that are creating revocable living trusts, for the most part, are going to be doing that to avoid probate. So in one of the last times that we talked, we talked about the idea of putting a last will and testament together,
Right.
but how the idea of probate was still very real, even with a will, right? One of the big things that we talked about, which I just want to reiterate, because it's important to know that, is that in putting together a will, it very likely means that our estate will still go through probate, right? It'll still have to pass through the court process. So in most cases, we will use a revocable living trust to avoid probate, right? And so this is the vehicle, this is the planning tool that we're going to use to avoid that process and to still ensure that all of our stuff goes to the people that we want it to go to when we're not around anymore, right? To set up their estate in a way where at the passing of the second of them, or if it's a single individual, at his or her passing, we're ensuring that everything goes to the people they want it to go to, but it's not passing through the court, right? It doesn't have to be overseen by a judge. They don't have to hire a lawyer who goes to court. They can do it much more privately. They might still seek the guidance from a lawyer, but they're going to do it on their own terms, according to their own timeline. Um, and again, just really avoiding that court process. And so again, I really want to be clear, in most cases, people are putting trust together, not because they're wealthy, right? Not because they have tons of money. It's because they really want to make sure that the administration of their estate is more simple and straightforward. Because at the end of the day, when I die, I'm not the one administering my estate.
Right.
And so if I leave a mess and if I leave a situation that it has to go through court and my loved ones have to hire a lawyer, it's them going to court. It's them hiring the lawyer, not me.
Right. Right. Um, so let me ask you, because you said that actually the reason we're doing or putting our stuff in a trust is because we want to avoid the probate. Can it be a situation where we have a will and we have a trust and we combine the two?
Yeah, so great question. Every single situation where we create a trust, we create a will. So a will always should, okay, and so I can't speak for other attorneys, but a will should always accompany a trust. And here's the reason why, right? And so I'll try to make this summarize this as quickly as possible and not make go into too much crazy detail. But the concept of a trust is that this is going to help us avoid probate. Okay, right? That's for most of us, that's the goal. Avoid probate, simple administration for our kids. I know I've said that like 5 times already. I just want people to keep on hearing it. But here's the thing: I'm only going to avoid probate with a trust if I fund it, if I fund the trust properly. What does that mean? That means that I have to, now that I have a trust in place, I have to go, ideally my attorney that I'm working with, right? And so we do this with our clients. Ideally, the attorney is going to help retitle any real estate that I own, that the clients own, to the trust, right? So if I own property here in Illinois, we're going to retitle it to the Matt Margolis Trust. If I have a second house in Wisconsin, we're going to work with an attorney in Wisconsin. We're going to make sure that that property gets retitled to the Matt Margolis Trust. Great. Now we've dealt with the real estate, right? Which is right in line with what you're doing.
Right.
But then we look at other things, right? What about the checking accounts, the savings accounts, the money markets, the CDs, the brokerage accounts at Wells Fargo? Making sure that our beneficiary designations are up to date, and maybe naming the trust as a beneficiary when it comes to life insurance or 401ks or IRAs. We need to make sure that our trust is properly funded. So we want to make sure that these bank accounts and these investments are being retitled to the Matt Margolis Trust. Okay. When it comes to the trust, I'm called the trust maker. I can make changes to the trust over time. It's going to be my assets, my real estate, my bank accounts, my investments that go into the trust. I also get to be the trustee. And as the trustee, I can manage all of that stuff. So just because I just retitled my house and my bank accounts and my investments to the trust, it doesn't mean that I can't access them anymore. As the trustee, I can still do everything with all of that stuff just as I managed all of it prior to having a trust in place. The trust operates off my social security number. My life stays the same. Everything is good. Simple, easy. I tell clients the biggest change you're going to notice will be that your statements from the financial institutions are going to be mailed to you, and it's going to say the Matt Margolis Trust, Matt Margolis Trustee, and then your home address, right? That literally the only difference you're going to notice. But here's the thing, right? The reason why we still put a will together, even with a trust, is that people don't always fund their trusts properly, right? I can have the longest conversation with clients. I can go into all the detail necessary to let them know that they have to go to Wells Fargo to retitle their investment account. They have to go to Bank of America to retitle their checking and savings and money market accounts. And obviously, we'll take care of all the real estate. We will always help them transfer the real estate into the trust. But if they don't take those steps proactively, if they don't go and retitle those bank accounts or investment accounts, and one of those accounts ends up being in the name of the surviving spouse when he or she dies, guess what? If that account is in my name only at the time I die, even with a trust, that account will go through probate. And so I have this will in place that basically says, hey, judge, my name's Matt Margolis. If you're reading this, it means I passed away, but I have a trust in place. I have this Matt Margolis trust. And so even though this account is going to go through probate, at the end of the day, I want it to pour over. I want this account to pour over into my trust, and then my trust will distribute it according to its terms. Okay, so we refer to this will as a pour over will. Now, this is also where we name guardians for minor children. So any of us that have minor children, we have to have a will as well with our trust, because that's where we name guardians. That's where, who's going to take care of our kids if something happens to us. The idea behind the will accompanying the trust is I kind of discuss it and talk about it as a safety net. It's there in case we need it, but I hope that we never need it. I hope that we never use it, because I hope that my wife and I survive our youngest child turning 18, so we never need to access the guardianship provisions. And I hope that, we make sure that all of our stuff is in our trust, so that upon the passing of the second of us, nothing's going through probate, right? Because again, that's the reason why we set up the trust. That's the reason why most people set up trusts. Not because they got tons of money. It's because they want that easier administration of their estate when they pass away.
Okay, well, that answers a lot of questions. So pretty much, well, which is great. And I would say, so pretty much we're having a trust in place. Can we also have a few people in the trust? Can we have only one person as a trustee? Can we have 5 people? And, my experience, we're working with clients that they have their real estate, in a trust fund, and was pretty much that they had their name. And if something happened to them, which, they pass away, there is a second, a third, and a fourth. So is that also possible to do it?
Yeah, so a couple different things, and maybe hopefully I'm answering your question in full by the answer I give. So first of all, when we create trusts, if I'm a married couple, my wife and I can either each create our own trust, or we might create one joint trust, in which case we are both the trust makers, right? So we're both the ones creating the trust. We can both make changes to the trust over time as long as we have capacity, right? Once we lose capacity, we can't make changes anymore. We would both be trustees. Okay, so if we have a joint trust, even if we had separate trusts, we would be co-trustees, meaning any assets that we put in these trusts as co-trustees, we can still both have access to all the bank accounts and all the investments and the real estate. It's not like, oh, now that it's in the trust, only Matt can access it. Or even if we had separate trusts, oh, because it's in Matt's trust, only Matt can deal with this and my wife can't. No, we would both be co-trustees. We both kind of maintain that control and the ability to access what we have. But then, speaking to what you were talking about, what if something's going to happen to both of us at some point? I'm not going to say what if. At some point, something will happen to both of us. Either we will both be incapacitated, one of us will be deceased, the other person will be incapacitated, and at some point we will both pass away. And so we need successor trustees that can step in and manage the assets in the trust, right? And so if I pass away and my wife's incapacitated and has some form of dementia, well, we need a successor trustee that can step in and handle the house and manage our bank accounts and our investments, all of these assets that are titled in the name of the Margolis Trust. Okay, and so when it comes to naming successor trustees, we can name as many people as we want. We can name people one at a time. We can name 2 people to act together. I don't love the idea of naming more than two people that can act together, but I've had some clients that have wanted to name 3 or 4 of their children all as co-trustees. We allow them, it's their choice. I'm not going to prevent them from doing it. But, we've all heard the phrase, too many cooks in the kitchen. We want to make sure that, okay, if we're going to name 2 or 3 people, they get along. They're going to be able to work well together. We don't want to set this situation up where we're going to have people fighting and arguing. We also, even though I always say, it's nice to have more trustees than less when it comes to successor trustees, because who knows what can happen, right? Let's say I've got my brother, my sister-in-law, my parents, a good friend. I've got them all listed as successor trustees, and there's 5 of them. Hey, something could happen to the first 4, right? What if they pass away before us? They're sick, or they're just at a point in their life where they can't take on this responsibility, right? The thing is, when we plan, we don't know what the future brings for anybody. And so having more people than less is great, but by no means am I suggesting to clients that they should name Joe the neighbor because he's a nice guy and he mows their lawn when they're out of town, right? Does that answer your question? Is there something I didn't cover?
No, it does answer a lot of the questions, and I'm gonna say this. Obviously, we can't answer all the questions. This is not why we're here. The reason we're here is to give the information about what is a trust and should you do a trust. And I've seen also young and new homeowners that they're not married, for example. They're taking the house, they're buying their house, they're first time home buyers or second time home buyers, they're not married, but they want to take the property, their home, and they put it into a trust with both of their names on it. So obviously, you don't need to be 50, you don't need to be 70, you don't need to be 90 to do that. As we said, same with the will, the faster you do it, the better. So also, I'm going to point out that you said that once you do the trust, it's up to you to go to those, to go to the bank, to go to the institutions and to put the trust name, because if you don't do it, it doesn't mean anything. Or maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. I mean, a trust is, what I tell people, a trust is as good as what's in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and believe me, we've seen situations where people have created trusts and, listen, I know for sure that there's times when I'm sure we give guidance to clients and they don't follow it, but I can say that we've seen situations where people have come to us and, the adult children were referred to us. We didn't do their parents' planning, but, mom or dad passed away.
Yeah.
And they come to us with all the documents and listen, this person had a trust in place, but guess what? They never retitled any of their assets into the trust. No. And so even though they had this trust, we're still going to have to go through probate because all the assets were in this person's name when he or she passed. And so it really is important for people to fund the trust. I mean, I get it. People feel really good when they leave the attorney's office and they've signed all those documents. And for a lot of people, it's been on their to-do list for a while. But I always tell clients, I'm like, listen, we're so close to the finish line, but we are not there yet.
Right.
We still have some homework to do. Let's just get it done. Then you can feel good, right? Then you can be confident that you've sealed your planning and it's complete.
Right, and I think you repeated it a couple times that you said fund it. So when you say fund it, means you created. So I would take it as, now you created a business, a corporation, an LLC. You created it. Now you need to get the credit card on that name of corporation. You need to get those homes. You need to get those valuable things that you have on that name, on the trust name. Otherwise, you just created a trust with nothing. There is nothing in it, because that's, so I will say that's the difference between, one of the differences I'm going to say, between a will and a trust. In a will, when I come to you, I'm like, oh, my phone is there, and then my camera in my house, and I put everything in the will, but I will have to go through probate. When in the other hand, when I create a trust, I need to fund the trust, and I need to take that name, go to the institutions, put my property under that name, and I don't need to go through probate. And we
Correct.
we'll probably have more discussion and repeat the probate, because that's what we're trying to maybe avoid, or maybe making the probate a lot easier. And we spoke about it. So I think it's very important to know what's a trust. Like we discussed, what can we do with that? What are the steps after we come to you and you set up the trust? What to do after that? And that's, I think, the most important. And Matt, me and like real estate, there is going to be a ton of questions, and each one of us is an individual that has his request and what to put in it. Like you said, oh, there is, if you have more than 4 million, you have less than 4 million, doesn't matter. There is, you're going to create the trust that you want. You're going to put the number of people. Some people have one kid, some people have 10 kids. What do you do? So again, it's very specific to each person. Yeah. I know you have a lot of stories, but maybe you want to share something, a situation that maybe went great, or maybe started wrong and went great. There is so many. Anything that you might want to share with us about the trust, and yeah, many stories you have.
So, I mean, I would say, a story that comes to mind that's very relevant to what we're talking about today would be a couple of years ago, sat down with this client. I think they were referred by another client that we had worked with. And it was one of those situations where this woman came in with her adult daughter, and she wanted to do some planning. She wasn't, medically she was doing fine, didn't think there was any issues, but was, a little older and wanted to make sure that all of her ducks were in a row. And her intentions were to come in and put together a will. And she was adamant that a will was all she needed. And of course I said, you know what, that's fine. I can appreciate that you're interested in just putting together a will, but listen, our process is such that I still want to discuss the idea of a trust with you. And I'm not trying to sell you on it. I just want you to understand the differences between a will and a trust. And at the end of the day, if you're still wanting to proceed with a will, great. I'm not charging you for my time. And so if you'll just hear me out, and if nothing else, I will have wasted an hour of my time. Okay, right? It'll be my time to waste, and hers, of course. I don't want to say her time isn't worth it, which it is. But we had this conversation, and I followed up and sent her and her daughter some quotes for the planning. And the client ended up getting back to me a week later, 2 weeks later, and said, Matt, I was so adamant about putting a will together, but after you explained things, after I came to realize that again, it was this, after I came to realize that trusts aren't just for people with tons of money. I thought that because I had a couple $100,000 in a house, it just wasn't something that was appropriate for me. So we ended up putting together a trust for this client, and unfortunately, about 6 months later, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She passed away within a year after the diagnosis, and the entire estate avoided probate. Her daughter was able to step in as trustee, manage the estate, get everything to her and her siblings. And the daughter was extremely appreciative, and came back and really thanked us for taking the time and explaining and making sure that we provided these other options to her mom, and appreciated the fact that she didn't have to go through probate, because she knew that if her mom had just put a will together, and if we just said, fine, you want a will, that's great, we'll let you do it, it's your choice at the end of the day, obviously. But she was glad that we kind of pushed her and made sure that she understood her options. So it's things like that, and that doesn't always happen, right? That's few and far between that a story happens like that, and something's where somebody does pass away so soon after we do their planning. I mean, it happens at times, obviously, based on what we do, but it's nice when you hear something like that people appreciate what you do, especially when something so unfortunate happens out of the blue. Right. It was a diagnosis that came out of nowhere for her.
Great. And I would say that this story kind of like, hopefully this video and people will watch it, will save you that whole hour of explaining and sitting with the client. But obviously you'll keep on doing it because this is the part of service that we do. We always educate here. We're not going to try to sell you this home or that home. We're not going to try to sell you this will or this kind of trust just because we can maybe make another $100 or $200 or $5,000. That's not. Actually, on the opposite, when you actually suggest people to do a trust, you're, I would say, not losing money, but if they don't do a trust and go to probate, they saved a lot of money. You didn't make a lot of money. Because when you go to probate, me and you know that this is not cheap. So it's good to know that you're always there to help them and to educate them. It's always in their court to have their decision after they have made their mind, and maybe they're probably going to ask you. And the reason you sit with them for an hour and not 15 minutes more is because there are more questions. So what do I do with this, and how is this, and what is that? Because it's pretty much a snowball. It's a lot more questions coming. Eventually, they understand it and they choose their way. This actually gave me more information than I knew. So I'm happy for having this conversation. Like always, I always learn something new. Hopefully everyone learn. So thank you, Matt, for your time. Again, Matt Margolis with Margolis Weldon. You'll have his information right here, his phone number, his email, and feel free to reach out. Lily, if you need any consultation, this can only help. It cannot harm you. It's better than insurance. So do it. You don't need a ton of money, as you heard. And Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Shlomo. You got it anytime.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the next video because we have a lot more information to share. So I'll see you all next time.